HOA Karen thought she could destroy my life by selling my house at auction behind my back. She had no idea I was about to flip the entire game. When the dust settled, I didn't just get my house back, I owned the whole neighborhood. But that was only the beginning. When I moved into Willow Creek, I thought I had found the perfect neighborhood, quiet streets, pretty parks, and a cozy community. I spent years turning my small house into a dream home. But what I didn't realize was that the real challenge wasn't the mortgage, the lawn maintenance, or even the property taxes. It was Karen, the HOA president. From the first week, Karen made herself known.
"You'll need to paint your fence a different shade of beige,"
she chirped one morning.
"Our community guidelines specify desert sand, not mocha mist."
I complied to keep the peace, but that was just the beginning. Soon, Karen fined me for minor things. A single weed in the yard, my mailbox being too modern, even a tiny crack in my driveway. Every time I fixed one thing, she found another. And the fines piled up faster than I could keep track. One afternoon, after getting home from work, I found a thick envelope taped to my door. Notice of delinquency and foreclosure proceedings. I was stunned. I hadn't missed a mortgage payment, but according to the letter, the HOA had quietly placed a lien on my property for unpaid fine sand. Now they were selling it at auction. I stormed into the next HOA meeting, letter in hand. "You can't just sell someone's home without warning," I shouted across the community center hall. Karen smirked, flipping through her clipboard.
"You were warned. Multiple notices were sent."
I looked around. A few neighbors looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. Karen had them all intimidated. I tried to fight it, but the law was on their side. Small HOA fines had snowballed into thousands of dollars in penalties, interest, and legal fees. I felt helpless watching my own house being listed for auction, like I didn't even exist. But then, something unexpected happened. Just before the auction, I received a significant inheritance from a late relative. I hadn't touched the money yet, saving it for something important. Losing my home because of Karen's pettiness felt personal. So, I made a plan. I used the inheritance to pay off the entire lien on my property, settling all the debts and preventing the auction from going through. It was a relief to keep my home, but that wasn't the end of it. I wasn't going to let Karen and the HOA continue to hold power over the neighborhood. The auction still took place, but now I was no longer involved. Instead, I watched as other properties went under the hammer. When the auction was done, I stayed behind and approached the next step of my plan. In Willow Creek, the HOA also controlled the rights to several vacant lots and foreclosed homes they had planned to auction off. I stayed for those, bidding on every single one. One by one, I bought up the properties under their noses. Karen had no idea what was happening until it was too late. She thought she was still in control, but when I finalized my purchases, I held the majority of the neighborhood's properties. 2 weeks later, after paperwork and filings were finalized, I called an emergency HOA meeting. I wasn't just a homeowner now, I was the majority property owner. I walked into the meeting hall holding a thick binder. Karen tried to start the meeting as usual. "Actually," I said, cutting her off, "I'll be leading this meeting." Karen blinked.
"You can't."
"Yes, I can. As of last week, I own 68% of the properties in Willow Creek. Effective immediately, the board is dissolved. Karen, you're removed your position." The room erupted into gasps and whispers. Karen stood up, spluttering protests, but no one supported her. Karen stormed out in disbelief. Over the next month, I made sweeping changes. Stupid fines were abolished. Lawn inspections were scrapped. People were allowed to paint their houses whatever color they wanted. Karen tried to fight back, filing complaints and even threatening lawsuits. But legally, she didn't have a leg to stand on. Eventually, Karen sold her own house and moved away, too embarrassed to stay. The best part? I didn't keep all the extra properties. I offered them back to longtime residents at affordable prices, making sure Willow Creek stayed the wonderful community it was meant to be. I had turned Karen's power trip into a second chance for everyone, and it felt better than anything money could buy. Karen from the HOA decided her responsibilities included checking every barbecue in the neighborhood and called 911 when she spotted me on my driveway. But little did she know, I wasn't just grilling meat for the neighbors. I was preparing something much more important than her usual complaints. When she decided to interfere, she had no idea her actions would attract the attention of far more influential people. This was just the beginning. It was a warm Saturday afternoon when I decided to host a BBQ in my driveway. I had been planning this event for weeks. It wasn't just any BBQ, but a catered lunch for the mayor and several local business owners. The sun was shining, the food was ready, and everything was set for an afternoon of networking and community building. Just as I was about to fire up the grill, I saw Karen, the HOA representative, staring at me from across the street. She marched over with that look I knew all too well.
"Neighbor,"
she called out, her voice laced with disapproval.
You can't have a BBQ in your driveway. It's against HOA rules.
I raised my eyebrow, trying to stay calm. Karen, this is a private event. I'm catering lunch for the mayor and some local business owners. Her eyes narrowed, clearly unimpressed.
Catering lunch for the mayor? That doesn't change anything. I'm calling the authorities.
Before I could respond, she whipped out her phone and dialed 911. My jaw dropped. I had dealt with her before, but this was a new low. She was already on the phone, explaining to the dispatcher how I was violating HOA rules by hosting a barbecue. I shook my head in disbelief. I'm catering for the mayor, Karen, I yelled. But she didn't listen. She was too busy making her case to the police. Moments later, a squad car pulled up to the curb. The officer stepped out, and I walked over to meet him. Officer, I'm hosting a professional event here, I explained. It's a catered lunch for the mayor. This is not just a regular barbecue. The officer turned to Karen.
Is this true, ma'am?
He asked. Karen scoffed.
I don't care who she's catering for. She's breaking the rules, and I'm not going to let her get away with it.
The officer's tone shifted.
Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside.
Karen didn't like that one bit, but she complied. The officer and I went over the situation in detail, and after a few minutes, he turned to Karen.
This is not a violation of any laws. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the area.
Karen was stunned.
What? You're not going to do anything?
No.
The officer replied firmly.
If you continue to cause trouble, I'll have to ask you to leave the premises entirely.
Fuming, Karen stomped back to her house, muttering under her breath. I turned back to the event, relieved that the issue was finally resolved. The mayor and other local officials arrived shortly after. The mood had lightened, and everyone was eager to begin.
Thank you for hosting us.
The mayor said as we shook hands.
This is exactly the kind of event that brings the community together.
As the event went on, I received praise from several local business owners. Everyone was enjoying the food, the conversation, and the idea of fostering community bonds. Meanwhile, Karen was nowhere to be seen. It seemed like she had retreated into the shadows after her failed attempt to ruin the event. Later that afternoon, the mayor gave a short speech.
I want to thank our host for this wonderful event. It's these kinds of efforts that make a community strong.
By the time the event wrapped up, I couldn't help but smile. Karen had tried to interfere, but in the end, it had only made her look ridiculous. The event had been a success, the mayor was pleased, and the community was stronger than ever. As I cleaned up, I felt a sense of accomplishment. Despite Karen's attempts to sabotage it, the event had gone off without a hitch, and I'd managed to stay calm and collected in the face of her unreasonable interference. In the end, she was the one who had lost, and I was the one who'd brought the community together. The roar of an engine shattered the morning quiet. Karen appeared in camouflage shorts and a tight-fitting tank top with the provocative slogan, HOA means power, astride her orange ATV. Without even glancing at the warning signs, she laughed and slammed on the gas.
Learn how the real queens of the neighborhood relax.
She yelled, speeding past her girlfriends armed with smartphones.
And that old psycho can have his meetings with his carps?
The ATV rattled over the gravel until it reached the turn where I had dug an irrigation ditch the day before, just part of the drainage work. Karen didn't slow down. One moment, the machine beneath her whined, bucked, and flew forward. The next thing I saw was her awkwardly splashing right into my pond. Lily pads and algae floated to the surface. A second later, she emerged too furious, covered in silt and green slime, her face contorted with rage, tangled seaweed in her hair.
You bastard!
Karen screamed, spitting out water.
You set this all up. This is an assassination attempt. Girls, call the cops, have them pack him off to hell.
But let's take it one step at a time. My plot of land was my pride and joy. I had invested years of labor, love, and patience into it. 15 years ago, I dug the pond with my own hands, reinforced the banks with stone, and released carp into it. Every morning, they would glide to the shore to greet mate, was a place of peace, a place where I felt alive. Everything changed with Karen's arrival. She moved in 6 months ago, and from the very first days, it was clear that peaceful life had come to an end. With her came her ATV, which she used as if the entire street belonged to her. The noise of the engine, shouts, laughter at 6 in the morning. Soon, Karen became the chairman of the Homeowners Association, the unofficial queen of the neighborhood. She acted as if every piece of land was under her jurisdiction. My garden path became a racetrack. She used my stones and tools to build ramps, ignoring any comments. I went to the police without a warrant. They couldn't even enter her property. My complaints were deemed insignificant. She tore down my private property signs and threw them onto my porch with a smile.
Here's your property. Maybe you should put up a barrier, you bum.
The HOA just laughed at my complaints,
Well, Karen had some fun. So what if she messed with your pond?
but I wasn't going to give up. I installed cameras, reinforced the fence, and updated the signs. I had lived here for 15 years, and I wouldn't let my property be turned into a circus. On Saturday, Karen came out in camouflage shorts and a tank top with HOA means power written on it, got on her ATV, and demonstratively ignoring the signs, sped down my path.
Look how the ladies from the outskirts relax.
She shouted to her friends, who were filming everything on their phones.
And that old man can hang out with his carps.
At the turn, Karen didn't notice the irrigation ditch I had dug the day before. The ATV jumped, Karen screamed, and the next thing I saw was her, like a sack of cement, splashing into my pond. She surfaced with seaweed in her hair, covered in duckweed and mud, angrier than ever.
You bastard.
She yelled.
You set this up on purpose. You tried to kill me. Girls, call the police.
Half an hour later, the sheriff arrived. He looked tired and unsurprised.
Do you have a recording?
He asked, not looking at Karen. I silently handed him the SD card. He inserted it into his tablet, fast-forwarded the video, and nodded.
Madame, you entered private property without permission.
She left, seething with rage. The next day, the police report was already with the HOA. The neighbors organized a rally against Karen. A week later, the board members had no choice but to announce a vote on her removal. With a 92% majority, Karen was ousted from her position.
You need to sign this form.
Karen said, sliding a paper across the table with a smirk sharp enough to slice through my last nerve.
We're officially registering your horses as HOA community property.
I raised an eyebrow. My horses Storm and Lily are now what?
Community property.
She repeated, folding her arms.
They've been grazing on HOA land, so technically that makes them HOA assets.
I stared at her. Karen, they stuck their heads over the fence and nibbled a little grass. That's not trespassing. It's called being a horse.
The bylaws state,
She said smugly.
any personal property benefiting from HOA land may be claimed by the association.
Ah, so this was a play. A ridiculous one, but a play nonetheless. Fine. She wanted to game the system? I'd play right back. See, ever since I moved into my non-HOA home, yep, not part of their jurisdiction, Karen, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, had treated me like an intruder. The first day I moved in, she marched up with a clipboard.
Do you have a permit for those animals?
She'd asked, sniffing like Storm. My gray gelding was radioactive. I'm not in the HOA, I replied, smiling. That twitch in her jaw told me I'd ruined her week. She hated the fact that I had land, horses, and freedom she couldn't control. She'd filed complaints about manure smells, flies, and even claimed Storm and Lily were psychologically intimidating to the neighborhood. But this was a new low. And you're planning to use my horses for what, exactly? I asked.
We'll feature them at the community fair. Pony rides, petting zoo. It's a perfect opportunity.
I smiled slowly. Great. That means the HOA is now financially responsible. Feed, boarding, vet care. It totals around $5,000 a quarter. I'll have an invoice sent over. She blinked.
What?
If you're claiming my horses, then they're yours. On paper and on budget. The next morning, she found the invoice in her mailbox. $5,000, due in 30 days. That night, she was at my door, face flushed with rage.
This is harassment.
No, Karen, I said, sipping my tea. This is accounting. At the next HOA meeting, which I attended as a concerned neighbor, Karen tried to spin the story.
It was a misunderstanding.
You submitted a signed claim, I interrupted. You tried to seize my horses, so either pay up or retract the letter. Board members muttered. One whispered about liability. Another said,
We really can't afford a lawsuit.
I think it's best we remove this item from the agenda.
Someone added quickly. Karen tried to save face.
Fine, the horses are his, it's resolved.
But she wasn't done yet. A week later, I found a legal notice taped to my door. Karen had filed a lien against my property for unauthorized grazing. That's when I called Tom, my lawyer buddy, who practically cackled as we prepared a harassment counterclaim. Then I started asking around. Turns out, Karen had fined a neighbor for putting a gnome in their garden, another for using a basketball hoop, and someone else for having their kid's bike on the porch. At the next HOA meeting, the room was packed. I brought copies of all the complaints. You're weaponizing your position, I said calmly to Karen, and you filed fraudulent paperwork against someone outside your jurisdiction. One board member stood.
I motion to remove Karen as HOA president.
The vote was unanimous. 3 weeks later, a for sale sign went up on Karen's lawn. We threw a backyard barbecue to celebrate. The neighborhood kids fed Storm and Lily carrots and apples, while the adults laughed and shared HOA horror stories. I hung the original invoice on the barn wall. A little memento of what happens when someone pushes too far. Never try to rope a cowboy, especially not with his own horses. When a power-hungry HOA president and her elite friends took over my ranch for their lavish summer gala, they crossed a line no landowner should ever have to endure. They ignored my legal warnings, set up bison burger grills right next to my herd's pasture, and even threatened to kick me off my own land. But Storm, my 2,000-pound bull, had the last word that day. What boundaries would you protect when everything you've spent 20 years building is at stake? My name's Henry Caldwell. 20 years ago, I poured my life savings into 15 acres of untouched countryside. Back then, the land was wild and raw. No fences, no neighbors, no politics. Just me, my cattle, and a dream. I worked sunup to sundown, turning that land into a working ranch. Every post, every trough, every gate, built with my own 2 hands. I wasn't rich, but I was proud and free. That freedom started to slip when the HOA moved in 5 years ago. Whispering Pines Estates, fancy name for a collection of luxury homes that crept up right against my property line. At first it was harmless, just new neighbors who kept to themselves. But then the letters started coming. Noise complaints when my roosters crowed, warnings about the odor of livestock, requests to beautify my fence line so it would be more visually pleasing to passing drivers. I reminded them I wasn't part of their HOA. That didn't seem to matter. Things came to a head last summer. Karen Peterson, the HOA president, sent me an invitation to the Whispering Pines Summer Gala, a celebration of community and progress, it said. Hand-delivered by a young man in a blazer who looked like he'd never seen a cow up close. I tossed it in the bin. 2 weeks later, I came back from the feed store to find white tents going up on the edge of my property. Not near it, on it. They had dragged their luxury party right past my fence and onto my field like they owned the place. There were grills smoking next to my pasture, music blasting, people in silk dresses drinking champagne just feet away from Storm and the rest of my herd. One of them even had the nerve to hang a string of lights on my fence. I stormed over, no pun intended, and demanded they leave. Karen, dressed head to toe in pastel pink, sipped from a glass and said,
Don't be so dramatic, Henry. It's just one evening.
I told her she was trespassing. She smiled.
Technically, this area is a gray zone. The property lines aren't well defined. We're more than happy to discuss it with the HOA legal team.
I'd already had my lawyer draw up a clear boundary map years ago, and I had posted signs every 100 feet. They knew perfectly well where my land started. Then she said the words that lit the fuse.
If you're not going to be cooperative, we may need to escalate this. You're only making things harder for yourself.
That's when Storm noticed the commotion. He doesn't like strangers, especially drunk, loud ones. He trotted toward the fence at first, curious. A group of partygoers laughed and pointed at him. Someone tossed a plastic cup near his hooves. Then Storm charged. 2,000 pounds of muscle and horns barreled toward the fence. The crowd scattered, screaming, glasses flying. Karen dove behind a catering table. Storm didn't break the fence. He stopped just short. But the message was clear. Within minutes, the grills were shut down, tents were being yanked from the ground, and guests were stumbling back to their Teslas. Karen never apologized, but she hasn't set foot near my pasture since. You see, you can send all the letters you want, throw your parties, pretend you own the world. But out here, land is earned, and it remembers who it belongs to. I was sitting on the porch, eating chips and looking at the night sky through binoculars. It was quiet, and suddenly, a sharp hiss. I got up, turned on the flashlight, and headed towards the garden. And at that moment, everything came together. For months, I was racking my brain. Why did the water bill suddenly double? After all, I strictly followed the HOA rules. No watering during the day. But Karen had a real botanical garden in her yard. Walking along the fence, I felt under the old bushes a plastic T cut into my garden hose. A green tube ran from it, straight into Karen's yard. I tore it off with fury and walked straight across her lawn. She was standing on the porch.
Are you crazy hanging around here in the middle of the night?
You're crazy, Karen. I showed her the T. You connected to my hose. You were stealing my water. She snorted and waved her hand.
Oh, come on. It's just water. Stop whining. I used it for the garden. You'll end up with dust and grass anyway.
That's stealing, Karen. I'm paying for it.
No one will believe you. I'm in charge here.
But let's take things one step at a time. My first suspicions had crept in at the beginning of summer, when I noticed that the pressure in the garden hose had become weaker, especially in the mornings. I attributed it to the drought and increased consumption in the area. However, a neighbor had mentioned that Karen had been bragging about a new irrigation system that cost nothing. Now it all came together. I needed proof, so I installed a GoPro camera, camouflaged it in the foliage, and waited. On the night from Thursday to Friday at 2:17, Karen emerged from the darkness in her signature work shorts and a t-shirt with the inscription Queen of Green.
What a lazy person.
She grumbled in the direction of my house.
You don't use it anyway.
I watched as she connected my hose to her drip irrigation system, pressed the button, and my water went to her flower beds. I watched as she connected my hose to her drip irrigation system, pressed the button, and my water went to her flower beds. The next day I prepared. I mixed vinegar, liquid soap, cornstarch for thickness, bright beet juice, a little blue food coloring, and glitter. The mixture turned out to be ominously festive. At 1:30 in the morning, I connected it all to the valve and began to wait. Karen, as scheduled, came out in an immaculate white coat with a cup of coffee in her hand. Without looking, she flicked the switch. A second, another, then a scream, deafening, full of hysteria. A viscous, poisonous pink stream burst from her hoses into the flower beds.
What the hell?
She screamed, yanking on the hose.
Who did this?
I walked out onto the porch, crossing my arms. Good morning, Karen. Looks like your system has malfunctioned. I hope you used your own water. She turned around. Her eyes were flashing.
You, bastard. You think you can do this? I'll sue you. I'll make you sing in a new way.
You stole my water, Karen, and I'm just tired of your tyranny.
I'm the president of the HOA, idiot. I can do whatever I want. I'm developing this neighborhood, and you're a pathetic loser with chips and binoculars.
No, Karen, you're a thief. She stamped her foot, tried to shout something, but stumbled and fell with a crash right into a puddle. Pink slime spread across her robe. I silently pulled out my phone and took a picture. In the morning, the photo quickly went viral on all the chat rooms in our neighborhood. It didn't take long for the HOA to react. Karen was immediately suspended with the wording, "for actions that undermine confidence in the governing body." A couple hours after the photo was published, the police arrived at the property. After a brief interview and a collation of complaints accumulated over the past months, the officer politely but firmly announced to Karen the imposition of an administrative fine and the obligation to pay me compensation for months of illegal use of water and resources paid for from my account. A hammer slams against wood, shattering the morning quiet. Karen, the HOA tyrant, screams, pointing at the carved arch over my yard.
Your wooden junk is a disgrace to this neighborhood. Tear it down now, or I'll have you thrown out of your home.
I stand at my doorstep, fist clenched. My voice is steady. Karen, you have no idea who you're dealing with. Her eyes blaze, but I know her power is crumbling, and I've got a plan to bring her down. 3 months ago, I stand beneath the wooden arch my grandfather crafted. Dark oak, etched with leaves woven into our family's symbols, holds his spirit. He carved it in 1975, pouring in his grief for my grandmother, lost that year, and his vow to protect our home. The arch is our beacon, our shield. The scent of oak blends with morning dew. Suddenly, tires screech. Karen leaps from her SUV, clutching a folder of complaints.
You think this old relic can stay?
She hisses.
It's ruining the look of the entire neighborhood.
This arch is the heart of our home, I reply, holding back anger. It's untouchable, and you know it. Her laugh cuts through the air.
I am the law here. Remove it, or I'll make your life miserable.
That night, I couldn't sleep, haunted by the thought of losing the arch. Its intricate carvings seemed to whisper stories of my grandfather's strength, his calloused hands shaping each curve with love. Karen's threats echoed in my mind, but so did my resolve to protect his legacy. I began digging through old family records, determined to find something to stop her. Night. I'm at the kitchen table, staring at an old photo. My grandfather carving the arch. My father, just a kid, by his side. Karen's gone too far. A knock at the door. Karen stands with 2 police officers, holding an eviction notice.
Open the door right now.
She shouts.
Your ridiculous arch breaks every rule and you're out of this neighborhood.
I grab my phone, my father on the line. His voice is ice. Son, keep them there as long as you can. I'm on my way with documents that'll turn this around. I open the door. Karen waves papers in the air.
You're finished. Pack your bags because you're getting kicked out.
I pull out the original neighborhood charter, signed by my grandfather. The arch is protected, but her own fence is a violation. Karen pales.
This is some kind of fake.
She stammers. An officer frowns. Ma'am, you'd better explain why you're trying to evict someone with legal rights to this arch. Morning. Karen paces her yard, neighbors whispering. A black SUV pulls up. My father steps out in a work jacket with his company's logo. He's the CEO of the firm that built this neighborhood, a fact I kept hidden to live without special treatment. Karen gasps.
Richard Thompson, the CEO?
You've been extorting neighbors, forging documents, and ruining lives for years, my father says sharply. Your reign ends now. Karen pulls out a document, her voice shaky.
I have a contract. You can't just remove me.
That contract is a fraud, my father replies, and I have proof of your schemes. Suddenly, elderly Martha steps forward, clutching a folder.
I overheard Karen bragging about bribing inspectors to ignore her own violations.
The neighbors erupt in shouts. Police slap handcuffs on Karen. She yells, but the crowd drowns her out. Court! Karen stands before the judge, her face ashen. The judge delivers the verdict. For fraud, vandalism, and extortion, you're fined $500,000 and sentenced to 3 years in prison. Karen, in an orange jumpsuit, scrubs floors in the prison cafeteria. Her hands shake, her former arrogance gone. My pool didn't look like a pool anymore, more like a toxic swamp. The water was murky, everything was foaming, and the smell unbearable. And all of it because of one woman, Karen, president of the HOA. But to understand why she did it, we have to go back a little. I finally had a day off. Cleaned the pool, checked the filters, added a little chlorine like always. The water sparkled. The air was fresh. A perfect day to relax. And then she appeared. Karen stood on the sidewalk, hands on her hips.
Is that chlorine again?
What's wrong? It's a pool.
The smell reaches my terrace. I could barely finish breakfast.
Everything's within the rules, I said. And it's on my private property.
If I smell that again, I'll take care of it myself.
I thought she was just complaining, but she meant it. The next day, I found a letter in my mailbox. Nothing official, just a regular sheet of paper printed at home. At the top in bold, Official warning from the OA president. Then came a message in classic Karen style. The smell of chlorine from your pool is negatively affecting the comfort of nearby residents, especially during outdoor meals. Please take immediate action to eliminate the source of the odor. In the case of repeated incidents, further steps will be taken in accordance with HOA policy. Sincerely, Karen, HOA president. I read it twice. Would have been funny if it wasn't so typical. I crumpled it up and tossed it. Because honestly, I'm not going to stop using my own pool just because the HOA president doesn't like the smell of clean water. What I didn't know yet was that this time, Karen wouldn't stop at words. The next morning, I stepped into the yard and almost collapsed. A few steps from the pool, I noticed something was off. The smell, sharp, chemical, sweet, and bitter at once. Not chlorine, not detergent, something between paint and vinegar. I got closer and it became clear. The water was cloudy. White streaks along the edges, foam-like residue, a thin, oily film on the surface, shimmering in the sunlight. It looked like someone had been soaking old batteries in there. I checked the filtration system immediately. Everything was working. No technical issues, just completely ruined water. I tried to remember if it had rained or if there had been any nearby work, but everything had been calm, quiet. Just me, my yard, and the chemical stench burning my nose. I went inside, opened the footage, and started rewinding the night. Nothing. Silence, yard, lights, and then 3:17. Karen, hood up, gloves on, a large white canister. She came from the direction of her house, holding the canister with both hands. Stopped at the pool, looked around, unscrewed the cap, and slowly poured the contents into the water. The liquid kept flowing. She leaned in deeper, no hesitation, no attempt to hide. Confident, calm, deliberate. I just sat there watching the screen, then rewound again and again. And each time I asked myself, is she for real? Turns out yes, she was. I called the police. When they arrived, I showed them the footage. No words needed. The officers went to her house. Karen stepped out onto the porch. One of them asked, "Ma'am, did you pour a substance into your neighbor's pool?"
Yes, but it's a natural remedy for chlorine smell. I saw the recipe on Facebook in the HOA Eco Homemakers group. It's just vinegar, baking soda, hydrogen peroxide, and a drop of eucalyptus. So it wouldn't stink anymore.
You've just admitted to trespassing and damaging private property. That's a violation.
But I meant well.
You're getting a fine, and from now on, stay away from other people's pools. It took 2 days to clean the pool. Drained the water, scrubbed everything, ordered new filters. Karen's been quiet since then, though sometimes she walks by with a look like I'm the one to blame. But ever since that day, she hasn't smelled chlorine again. And the pool? Cleaner than ever. Because now, I don't just watch the water. I keep an eye on the eco homemakers too. The bulldozer's roar shattered the morning silence as Karen, the self-proclaimed queen of our neighborhood, screamed, pointing at my sister Sarah's wheelchair ramp.
This eyesore ruins the entire block.
Karen shrieked. "Stop, you have no right," I yelled. Sarah wasn't just any neighbor, and Karen had made a massive mistake. Let's start from the beginning. 3 years ago, Sarah was in an accident and lost the ability to walk. Despite this, she rebuilt her life with fierce determination. We built the ramp so she could live independently and thrive. The city approved the project, and neighbors rallied behind her. But Karen, the HOA president, called the ramp a disgrace and bombarded us with complaints, threatening steep fines. Her obsession with control consumed her. She stalked our street, taking photos. We showed her the permits, but she ranted about property values. I warned Sarah that Karen was planning something big, and she said, "I'm ready." The roar of machinery dragged me outside. The bulldozer gleamed, poised to destroy. Karen, in a crisp white blouse, waved papers, glaring at me with contempt. "What are you doing, Karen?"
Fixing your mistake. This ramp violates HOA Rules Section 4.23.
"We have all the permits."
The HOA is above the city.
The blade tore into the concrete with a sickening crunch. I filmed everything, texting Sarah. Neighbors peeked out. Rodriguez grabbed a camera. My phone buzzed. 3 minutes. SUVs and police cars screeched onto the street. Karen's face drained of color. Sarah rolled out of an SUV in her wheelchair, dressed in a sharp suit.
Karen, you violated disability laws. This is now a state matter.
The crowd gasped. Karen dropped her papers.
This is a private HOA issue.
Destroying state property isn't private. Want to discuss the disability law I signed last month?
I watched Sarah and thought, that's my sister. She never backs down. Neighbors filmed. Jenkins went live. Karen backed away.
You mentioned HOA bylaws. We found violations, discrimination, and fraud going back 3 years.
Investigators stepped toward Karen. Let's go. We need to discuss your actions and those finances. Karen mumbled about property values as they led her away. I felt the tension rising. By morning, our video went viral. A lawyer friend sent files. Karen had been sued for similar stunts. Rodriguez revealed fines for his dad's lift. Sarah held a press conference by the ramp's rubble.
This is about everyone's right to dignity in their home.
Neighbors finally spoke up. Karen had awakened the community. Karen called an HOA meeting, but only her cronies showed. The neighborhood flocked to Sarah's meeting with disability rights lawyers. Then came the shock. Karen was taking kickbacks from the bulldozer company. The crowd fell silent. Sarah raised a folder.
I'm not just a neighbor. I'm the state governor. And I won't let people like Karen destroy lives.
Cameras clicked. Karen froze. I knew this was the end of her game. Karen faced a crushing blow. The court fined her $500,000 for breaking federal laws and fraud. She was sentenced to 3 years in prison. In the courtroom, she screamed,
This is unfair. You can't do this to me.
The judge was unmoved. You shattered trust and broke the law. Serve your time. I watched them lead her away and thought, justice had won. HOA Karen didn't just cross the line, she steamrolled over it. While I was out of town for the weekend, she decided my porch would be the perfect spot for her daughter's baby shower. Without asking, she decorated the entire area, pastel balloons, pink ribbons, signs that said, "It's a girl," all over my private property. I came home to find my porch hijacked like it belonged to the community, but that was only the beginning. I had just moved into the serene neighborhood of Maplewood Estates, a place known for its manicured lawns and tight-knit community. Eager to settle in, I spent weeks making the place feel like home. Cozy lights on the porch, a freshly planted garden, even a seasonal wreath was mine, and I took pride in it. Then one weekend, I went out of town to visit family. When I returned, I couldn't believe my eyes. My porch had been hijacked. Lace draped over the railings, chairs set up, pink and white balloons floating lazily in the breeze. A massive banner across the entrance read, "Emma's baby shower." Still dragging my suitcase, I looked around and spotted Karen, the HOA president, arranging cupcakes on a folding table. "Karen, what is this?" I asked. She turned casually. Oh, welcome back. I meant to let you know we're using your porch for the shower.
The lighting here is just so nice.
I stared at her, stunned. You didn't think to ask me? She shrugged.
It's just for a few hours. The HOA always supports community togetherness.
I said nothing. I was boiling, but I wasn't going to explode just yet. Instead, I waited. That night, I went to the store and loaded up on Halloween decorations. Cobwebs, Jack-o', lanterns, plastic bats, eerie red lights, and a 7-foot motion activated skeleton. I didn't sleep. I spent the entire night transforming my porch from baby shower bliss into full-blown haunted house terror. By morning, it looked like a horror movie set. The skeleton stood guard at the top of the stairs, holding a sign that said, "Trespassers will be spooked." A fog machine hissed from under the steps. I even added a fake raven that croaked when someone approached. At exactly 11 a.m., the guests began arriving, women in pastel dresses, clutching gift bags, and behind them, Karen, proudly leading the pack. She stopped dead in her tracks.
What is this?
I stepped outside, holding a mug of coffee. Oh, just decorating. You said the lighting was perfect, right? She was livid.
You ruined everything. This is clearly meant to humiliate me.
Oh no, I said with a grin. It's Halloween. I'm just getting into the spirit. Gasps rippled through the guests. Karen tried to usher everyone away, muttering apologies and glaring at me like I'd committed a felony. That same afternoon, I received a notice from the HOA about disturbing and offensive decorations. But this time I was ready. At the emergency HOA meeting she called, I came armed with photos before and after. I explained I had never consented to the baby shower, and that no one had even asked permission. The board deliberated. Eventually they turned to Karen and said,
You used someone else's private property without consent. That violates multiple HOA standards.
She was speechless. I was allowed to keep my decorations up through Halloween, and neighbors came by daily to admire them. From that day forward, Karen never assumed anything about my property again, but I knew this wouldn't be the last time she tried to cross a line.